Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. It was a wonderful autumn day. Against the backdrop of the blue sky, a warm glow emanated from the trees, covered in gold and crimson. The transparent air intoxicated with its freshness, the smells of damp earth and fallen leaves. In the old park, a man sat on a bench watching a large Labrador. The dog, with luxurious golden fur shining under the rays of the unusually bright autumn sun, was running between the trees on a carpet of fallen leaves with obvious pleasure. Suddenly, he braked sharply, and with all his might flew into a pile of fallen leaves, burying himself in it headfirst, raising a multicolored whirlwind around him. Crouching to the ground, the dog froze and looked at his owner. "Well, why are you sitting there glued? Come here, let's jump together. It's so much fun," the dog's gaze seemed to say. The dog snorted loudly several times, trying to free his nose from the cobwebs and leaf particles stuck to it, and grabbing a small branch, rushed towards the bench at full speed. "Well, Sam?" The owner gently stroked the dog that ran up to him on the withers, and carefully wiped the cobweb from its nose with a neat movement. "You're playing like a puppy today." The dog lifted its muzzle, and large, shining eyes stared into the owner's face. Its tail wagged wildly, and the dog's whole body twitched impatiently. Sam sat down, lifted a paw, and, looking at the man questioningly, whined softly. "Calm down!" The man laughed cheerfully. "What's with this attack of youth today? Did you come to play with me or something?" "No, I can't. It will pass later. Others will be jumping then, but around me." The man laughed quietly again, only this time the laughter sounded bitter. "If only Johnny were here with us. He would have run with you." The man suddenly fell silent. His face twitched as if in pain, and he added, pushing the words out with difficulty, "And if Ollie were with us, she, I'm sure, would have jumped with you. I remember all your tricks. It was she, Olga, who taught you, right?" The dog, hearing the sounds of a beloved voice and familiar names, yelped, wagged his tail furiously, and sat down next to the bench, still holding the broken branch in his teeth. Obviously, he hadn't completely given up hope of involving his owner in a fun game. However, he was clearly happy just sitting nearby and feeling the touch. The man, continuing to mechanically stroke the dog's head and habitually running the silky ears through his fingers, inhaled a portion of the delicious fresh autumn air with pleasure and closed his eyes. Memories, joyful and bitter, bright and sad, suddenly flooded over him. Their family was not particularly well off. Mom worked as a librarian all her life and joked a little bitterly that, fortunately, she managed to retire before the internet killed all libraries. Father worked as a foreman at a factory, and all his short free time from work, he rustled newspapers, looked suspiciously at his wife, and demanded good grades from his son. Wally, who loved his mom dearly, feared his father a little, although he loved him with some strange, forced love. Stephen was a stranger to his son, incomprehensible and unkind. It was terrible, but Wally couldn't change his attitude towards his father. Perhaps, as he grew older, the boy might have understood his parent better, improved relations. But there wasn't enough time for that. Stephen died suddenly. 9-year-old Wally was left with his mom, who, after Stephen's death, grieved as if she had lost not a gloomy, perpetually dissatisfied husband, constantly suspecting her of some mythical infidelities, but a loving man. After school, Walter entered the institute to study engineering. He doubted the correctness of his career choice. A relative helped him out, his mom's brother. Uncle Pete had a small garage workshop where he repaired and resold cars. All this fluff, all these little lawyers and traders, it's all like this. Needed today, gone tomorrow. He boomed in his smoke-roughened bass, listening to his nephew's doubts. And what kind of work is that, Lord forgive me, for a proper man? Shuffling papers and cheating others? Bah! But I have a real job, a man's job. Uncle Pete proudly straightened up and began pounding his chest with a rather large fist bearing traces of machine oil permanently ingrained in the skin. And I'll always have clients and work. I'll always earn a piece of bread with butter, and even with caviar if I want. And you, Wally, come work for me. I'll put you to work. You'll start actually doing what they teach you theoretically in your institutes. Plus, you'll start earning some decent money. Stop living off your mother. This was an argument, and a very serious one. Wally had long been trying to earn money here and there, but all of that, combined with his mom's modest pension and his even more modest student stipend, was barely enough to live on. Working at his uncle's workshop somehow clicked for Wally right away. He turned out to be a person with an innate technical knack and intuition. He was interested in everything he saw and did there, and he wanted to know and be able to do even more. Yes, Wally, your hands certainly grow from the right place, his uncle would say. These hands, plus more brains, you'll be priceless. You keep learning, he would bark sternly as a disciplinary measure. Wally learned easily, with pleasure. In the evenings, on weekends, he worked in the workshop, quickly gaining practical experience. After just a year, he was calmly entrusted with independent car repairs, starting with simple cases, but over time, increasingly responsible and complex ones. Time flew by, and 5 years later, by the time he graduated from the institute, Walter Stephen Borisov was already an accomplished master, who, despite his youth, already enjoyed a fairly solid reputation among car owners constantly worried about endless breakdowns. Wally, this is wonderful. I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you. Mom proudly stroked her son's new diploma with her palm. This is a very fitting profession for a man. Yes, Mom, you think so? Wally looked at his mom playfully. But if I were a lawyer now, that would be more prestigious. And my hands would be clean, he added, looking at his palms, covered in calluses, small abrasions, and indelible technical oil stains. Oh, son, that's nonsense. My dear brother Pete talks a lot of unnecessary stuff, of course, but he's right about this. You have a wonderful man's profession. Mom smiled. Don't laugh, Wally, but I've always thought that the ideal family is when the husband is an engineer and the wife is a doctor. Mom, you're something else. Wally burst out laughing. Why a doctor specifically? Oh, nonsense. I, for one, will definitely never, under any circumstances, be able to love a female doctor. They all seem somehow frozen to me. Son and mother laughed cheerfully and were happy. The categoricalness with which Wally judged female doctors was not accidental. It was difficult to explain, but something connected with medicine caused him some unpleasant feelings from early childhood. Wally desperately sabotaged trips to the clinic, screamed during appointments, and hid from the pediatrician called home. As an adult, Walter never even went to the clinic, being a healthy person and completely convinced that a cough and a runny nose were not reasons to die. He habitually ignored medicine, just like seasonal colds. However, this time he couldn't avoid a trip to medical institutions. He needed certificates to replace his driver's license. Who's the last? Wally asked, approaching the office door, addressing the fellow sufferers sitting along the wall. Not the last, but the next. I am. One of them mumbled, and receiving no response, looked up at Walter. You'll be after me. Hey, you'll be after me. Can you hear? Man, are you deaf or something? The man indignantly tried to attract Wally's attention. But Walter heard and saw nothing around him except an incredible, almost unearthly creature, walking, or rather floating down the shabby corridor of the clinic. A magical vision in the form of a short, slender young woman in a white coat fluttered past the frozen Wally and disappeared behind the office door. He sank onto a chair next to the angry, next-in-line man in confusion and suddenly felt his heart pounding. He entered the office in a semi-conscious state, glad it wasn't an appointment. A young woman sat at the table by the window, and the sun's rays, tangling in strands of reddish hair, created a halo effect above her head. "Hello, come in, sit down," a voice sounded, which seemed angelic to Wally. "Are you complaining about anything? Are you taking any medications?" she asked, without raising her head, quickly writing something on the form lying on the table in front of her. "What?" Wally stupidly asked again, unable to take his eyes off the doctor's golden glow. "Are you taking any medications?" She raised her head and looked intently at his face. Wally's breath caught, blood rushed to his cheeks, and his legs trembled. What? That was all the unfortunate man could utter. "All right, let me see your hands." She resolutely approached Walter, who was sitting like a statue, and he caught a light, barely perceptible scent of perfume. "Roll up your shirt sleeves higher. Higher still, please. Good, you can lower them. Look at me. No, not like that." She reached out her hands and gently lifted Wally's head, looking closely into his face. "Are you feeling unwell? Just please don't answer that." "What?" Wally predictably said. "All right, Walter Stephen," she said, looking at the documents. "You're behaving, to put it mildly, a little strangely. What's wrong with you?" She looked very intently at his face again. "I love you, doctor," Walter said in confusion. The doctor, Olga Dmitrievna, as it said on her badge, froze. Her face, professionally focused, suddenly became confused. "Do you need this certificate that badly?" she suddenly asked quietly, sitting down next to Wally. "Yes, I'll write you a certificate, Walter Stephen. You don't have to go to such extremes for that." "No, doctor, no! Olga Dmitrievna, this isn't for a certificate. This is for life." And Walter, looking her directly in the eyes, laughed loudly. A few months later, Olga and Walter got married. Wally's mom, happy, incredibly beautiful from this happiness, constantly caught her son's gaze, several times, unable to resist, pointed at Olga with her eyes, and giggled cheerfully, like a young girl. Their love was not like an all-consuming passion. They didn't need to be with each other every minute, every second of their lives. They didn't demand or expect sacrifice and selflessness from each other. It was enough for them that they had each other, and neither he nor she needed anything more. Although Olga did try to get something from Wally, without success. "You know, Wally, you really should be observed. This is not a joke at all, and your age is, let's say, not youthful anymore." "Well, I've brought problems upon myself," Walter grumbled. "I was living happily, and now here you go. A medical commission at home." "Ollie, stop it. Everything is fine with me. And anyway, the less you know, the better you sleep." He laughed. She shook her head disapprovingly. Words worthy of a teenager. "All right, I won't force you. You're a big boy. You have your life to live." Olga still managed to get her husband to undergo examination. There, they examined him for a long and tedious time, sat him down, laid him down, attached some clips, suction cups, then looked at the examination results with a thoughtful air. As a result, they told him to exclude heavy loads, eat less fried, smoked, spicy, and salty foods. In short, everything that was tasty. However, Walter didn't delve into the details at all. He just wanted to calm Olga down. They also prescribed him some pills, which Wally, with honest eyes, swore to Olga he would take regularly and, naturally, immediately forgot about them as soon as he left the house. Wally loved Olga very much and was completely happy. Ollie, as far as he could tell, was quite satisfied with life and would have been happy too, if not for one but. Olga really wanted a child, but despite all their efforts, a baby remained only a dream for now. Ollie, don't be so upset. We'll make it. What's the hurry? Wally said, sitting next to Ollie on the sofa. My own parents had me when they were almost 40. And look, I turned out fine. Do you have any complaints about me? Only substantive ones, please. Joker! Olga lightly tapped her husband's head with her fist. Always joking. Well, yes, you certainly have no need to hurry. Ollie shook her head sadly. My dear man, only men and wine get better with age. But I am a woman, you see. I only get older with the years. Olga, what nonsense! Where did you pick up such foolishness? Wally looked at Olga in surprise. It's not foolishness. It's the truth, Wally. Do you know what they call women like me in medicine if they're expecting a child? Ollie looked at her husband questioningly. Elderly primigravida. She pronounced the nasty word clearly and smiled bitterly. So you have everything ahead of you. But I need to get moving. And you, by the way, too. Ollie shook off her despondency and, as usual, ended the heavy conversation with a joke. Hear that, my beloved husband. Get moving. She jumped off the sofa and stood before him, fists on her hips. Walter looked at Olga, girlishly slender, thin, light, with reddish hair that hadn't faded at all over the years. He looked at her dear face, looked into her eyes, in which, as one of their friends said, devils dance, and felt a familiar, demanding, irresistible desire that hadn't diminished over the years. He jumped up, grabbed his beloved, and the higher powers seemed to have heard this conversation. Exactly 9 months later, the elderly primigravida Olga, who had carried her entire pregnancy like a 20-year-old girl, gave birth to a boy easily and quickly. Wally, dizzy from the anxieties, unusual thoughts and worries, held his son for the first time, looked fearfully at the pink, wrinkled face. The answer was an unexpectedly serious gaze. Redhead, the happy father exhaled. Olga, he's a redhead, just like you. He's not a redhead at all. Olga took the child from Wally, who stood awkwardly bent over, like all new fathers, afraid to move and drop the precious bundle. He's just golden, our golden boy. They named their son Johnny. Long awaited, suffered for, late, of course, he was the light in the window for his parents, and a joy, and a hope. Johnny grew up a healthy and intelligent boy. He didn't shine with special talents, but he studied without failing, that is, normally. He drew quite well, strummed the guitar, sat engrossed in computer games like all boys, but at least he didn't become addicted and allowed his parents to take him to the dacha with pleasure, where kebabs and pie awaited him. True, these family evenings and trips for the three of them happened less and less often. The reason was Walter's busy work, his business. By the time Johnny turned 10, Walter Stephen was already firmly on his feet, owning several workshops and car services. And it all started with that very uncle's workshop where he began working part-time from his first year at the institute. Childless, greatly aged Peter, a few years after Wally graduated from the institute, completely transferred his workshop to his nephew. At the same time, he negotiated the right to come at any time and, if he wished, as he put it, shake off the dust, by helping with some simple repairs. True, in most cases, Peter's visits amounted to discussing Walter's skill and business acumen. "Look at that!" he would explain again and again, profoundly and with pleasure, to some old client or friend. "It was me who made Wally get into all this back then. Without me, he'd be shuffling papers somewhere now. But with me, he became a master. And what a master! See? Honestly, He's already bought equipment there. It doesn't even fit in the premises anymore. You hear? He tells me, I'm opening a second workshop, Uncle Pete. I'm going to build a chain of services. What a fool. You hear? Can you imagine how they'll tax him now? And he'll take out more loans for the equipment, and for the rent, and for the salaries of all those idlers. Does he need that? He should sit quietly, turn screws for bread and caviar. After all, he has golden hands and a brain that works, God bless him. But no, he's poking his nose God knows where. Peter would break into an old smoker's cough, shake his head indignantly, and wave his hands, while his eyes glowed with pride for his nephew. Walter's business was large and troublesome, taking up more and more of his time. Wally, there's something. Johnny and I thought about it, talked it over, and decided to get a dog. Olga looked intently at her husband, who unexpectedly stayed home that evening and didn't rush off somewhere, as usual, on an urgent call. A dog! Walter was shocked and indignant. Do you even realize what a dog is in the house? It's noise, fuss, fur, dirt. They bring all sorts of infections into the house. He thought for a moment and added for some reason. Fur everywhere, you understand. And the main thing, Ollie, you have to walk it, the dog, every day. Olga looked at Wally mockingly, and at his last sentence she burst out laughing. Every day? Really? She shook her head, playfully feigning surprise. I just don't know what to say. You've simply amazed me. Imagine, walking every day. I always thought dogs peed once a week. You take it out, say, on Tuesday, and forget about it until next week. Are you making fun of me? Walter stated, looking at Olga, who was shaking with quiet laughter. He generally liked dogs, but preferred to do so from a distance, so to speak, abstractly. It so happened that he never had pets in his childhood or youth. True, when he was about 12, to his considerable fright, he was given an aquarium with fish, which, despite all his efforts, for some reason quickly and quietly died. Wally then felt a strange inner relief, which of course he carefully hid from his family. Keeping a dog, in his understanding, was an extremely difficult matter, involving endless hassles and the need to do things he absolutely didn't want to do. For example, dragging himself out into the rain and slush instead of lying on a comfortable sofa under a cozy, fluffy blanket and watching his favorite movie. Why do you need this? Walter made another attempt to influence his wife. Why do you need another dog? Don't you have enough worries with us? Olga looked into his eyes. I don't have enough worries, can you imagine? And especially, I don't have enough of you. Olga lowered her hands, moved away, and sat on a stool. And then she suddenly added in a completely different tone. Hearing it, Wally looked up at Ollie in surprise. He had never heard such a voice from her. Dry, somehow alien. I don't understand why you're worried about the inconvenience associated with a dog. You're never home anyway. What difference does it make to you who lives here? He gasped indignantly. And Olga, not letting him object, continued. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, my dear. Well, we'll talk now, since things have turned out this way. We miss you. Do you understand? Both of us. All your endless trips, business trips. You've been coming home just to sleep for a long time now. And what's more, we don't even see you at night. Do you think I don't know that you've taken to sleeping on the sofa in the living room? Ollie, I do that so I don't wake you up. Wally looked at his wife indignantly. It hurt him very much that everything he considered his personal great sacrifice for the sake of the family was now being held against him. Ollie, I work like a dog, earning money for you actually, so that you have everything. Walter was almost shouting. I do all this for you. For you, by the way. You don't have to do it for me, Olga replied quietly. Do you hear? If you want to do something for me, for Johnny, just please be with us more often and longer. For some reason, Wally's throat tightened. "Ollie, I'll try," he said and added, "Forgive me, my dear." "Try. I forgive you." Olga looked up at him, tucked her unruly red strands behind her ears with a habitual gesture, and added mockingly, "And we're getting a dog anyway." A couple of weeks later, a funny, plump Labrador puppy, tripping over its own paws, appeared in the house. "Oh, Ollie, you even chose a dog that's just like you, a redhead." Walter stumbled, laughing foolishly. "No, what?" The Labrador's eyes were circling around a coffee table with suspicious persistence. There was clearly a plastic folder with business papers within the puppy's reach, and Wally really disliked the intense attention Sam, as they named the young hooligan, was paying to it. "You're both somehow... well, in short, it's good with you." Wally fumbled for words and immediately jumped up with a mournful cry. It took the puppy only a second to pull the coveted folder off the table and try to escape with it into the depths of the apartment. Even when grabbed by the scruff, Sam tried to defend his prey, and the folder, finally in Wally's hands, was already considerably chewed and slobbered on. "Ollie, I take back my words," he shouted. "With you, yes, it's good. But with this parasite, it's impossible. What a scoundrel! And how did he manage to chew, tear, and slobber on everything so much in a few seconds?" The puppy sat behind Olga's legs with an almost human smirk on its face, and she laughed merrily. This was just the beginning. While Sam was growing up, Walter lost count of the ruined shoes, the torn wallpaper. And as for how many carelessly left documents the tailed shredder ruined, it was impossible to count. Moreover, Sam stubbornly chose the things that belonged to the head of the family. "He just loves you, you see. He loves you in a special way. That's why he chooses what is yours, what smells like you." Olga would laugh, comforting her husband. "Well, then I should be the one to beat him," Walter would joke grimly, sadly examining the latest evidence of the puppy's special love for him. And yet, Olga, as always, was right. Sam became a true friend to all of them and even brought their already happy family closer together. Everything collapsed in an instant. Ollie was hit by a car driven by a drunk kid. She was taken to the hospital in critical condition, where she died a few minutes later. Wally learned about Olga's death by phone. They called him from her mobile phone. "Ollie, darling, hello!" he shouted into the receiver, answering the call. "Ollie, listen, you always scold me, but imagine, I threw everything aside and bought tickets for the three of us to the sea. We're flying on Monday. Come on, arrange your leave at the hospital urgently. Ollie, Olga, hello, can you hear me?" He suddenly fell silent, sensing rather than hearing the suspicious silence on the line. And suddenly he became scared. The silence suddenly turned into something sticky and suffocating. It seemed to envelop him, making his heart beat faster and faster. "Excuse me," an unfamiliar male voice sounded in the phone. "Are you Walter Steven Borisov?" "Yes," Wally rasped in reply, his voice suddenly hoarse. "And who is Olga Dmitrievna Borisova to you? Is she your spouse?" "No, she is my wife," he answered, not understanding the word spouse, thinking nothing. What kind of spouse was his Olga? A spouse was something large, awkward, and tiresome, like an old wardrobe. But Ollie was his wife, his beloved, his friend, his sunshine, his happiness for life. "I am very sorry, but I must inform you. There was an accident. She died without regaining consciousness. Unfortunately, there was nothing we could do." The unfamiliar voice continued to say something, and Wally held the phone, gripping it tightly with his fingers, trying to grasp one simple thought. Olga, his wife, his beloved, his friend, his happiness for life, was no more. The following days passed in a haze, a fog. He went or drove somewhere, did something, responded to words, handshakes, phone calls from people. And he couldn't shake the feeling that it was his double doing all this, while he, the real Walter, was watching everything from the side. He saw his double pick up Olga's body from the hospital, saw how this same double sat silently next to Ollie's coffin, took it to the cemetery, and lowered it into the grave. Then this same double returned home, walked the despondent Sam, hugged him, lay down on the sofa, and closed his eyes. The next morning after the funeral, Wally was completely alone. Even that imaginary double, who had seemingly done all the hard work for him and seen Olga off on her last journey, disappeared. The morning was sunny and bright. Walter woke up to a sunbeam wandering across his face, tickling and blinding him. "Who didn't close the curtains yesterday?" "Some housekeeper," he mumbled, getting out of bed. "My mood is awful. Didn't I get enough sleep or something?" And Olga ran off somewhere early in the morning. I wish she'd come back sooner, Wally thought lazily. Ollie won't come. Never. You'll never see or hear her again. Never. The thought flashed mercilessly in his head. And as if in response to this thought, something tore in his chest with unbearable pain, seemingly crushing his ribs and tearing his insides. A frightened Sam darted around his owner lying on the floor, yelping softly. A scared, sleepy Johnny ran in at the sound of the yelping, called an ambulance, which, fortunately, arrived on time. After suffering a heart attack, Walter, thinner, quieter, realized that he would have to learn to live again. Learn not to wonder in the mornings why Olga wasn't calling them for breakfast. Break the habit of waiting for weekends to rush out of town with the three of them, him, Johnny, and Ollie, taking Sam along. Not to remember that he shouldn't turn on that American movie because Olga couldn't stand the actor in the lead role. He was literally going crazy from these constant, involuntary slips into the past and the agonizing returns from there back to reality, where Ollie wasn't. Having recovered a little, Walter started going not to the office, but to the car workshop. And the old, faithful work, to which he had been devoted for so many years, reciprocated. It accepted him like a good friend, occupied his hands, time, and thoughts. Walter gladly put on the old oil-stained overalls, which he hadn't worn for many years, and to the astonishment of the mechanics and everyone else who looked at him like a demigod, he climbed into the inspection pit. At first, the service workers looked at him with surprise. They felt awkward in his presence. The eyes of those around him clearly read, "What whim has come over him? This is nonsense. The man has money to burn, and he's sitting under cars up to his ears in machine oil, has bruised all his fingers, eats some rubbish. It's all incomprehensible, strange. And besides, he's hanging around here unnecessarily. Now you can't even sneak out for a smoke." Days went by, months passed, and he continued to work regularly in the car workshop for several hours a day alongside everyone else. Accustomed to the owner's presence, the workers greeted him warmly and sincerely and called him Stephen among themselves. If he, busy with his main large affairs, suddenly didn't come to the workshop, they understood that they already missed him. "Mary, hi!" the mechanics shouted to the incredibly beautiful young secretary from the central office. "Does the boss need you? He's in the third bay today." Mary, as usual, rushed in the indicated direction with a stack of documents. Work binges. That's what the firm's employees jokingly called the times when Walter disappeared into the workshop. "He's gone mad!" Uncle Peter, now quite old but still working, diagnosed Wally. "Wally, you were a fool before, and you still are, even though your head is already gray. You're the boss. What are you rattling around with metal here?" "And what should I do? Rustle papers?" Wally snorted. "And who taught me all my life that I should do a man's job?" "Well, I'm not taking back my words, but you're, in short." The uncle was clearly flustered. "It's still somehow wrong. It's because you're alone. You're lonely. That's why you're acting up. You need a woman. Peter, with his bluntness and directness, hit the sore spot. Walter was indeed very lonely. When Olga was with him, he was not alone for a single second of his life. He felt that they were together, even if Olga was far away. But the pain was there. Mom and Sam, of course, were nearby. But his son, his only beloved, precious one, did not fill the emptiness that had appeared in his father's life. Olga's death, for some reason, did not bring Johnny and Walter closer, as it seemed it should have, but on the contrary, it separated them. 16-year-old Johnny, having grieved for his mom loudly and demonstratively, withdrew into himself, into his own world. To his father's attempts to talk, to become closer, Johnny replied with rude frankness, "Dad, let's be honest. You can't replace Mom for me anyway. And you were always a so-so father. No, I have no questions about money and all that. No complaints there. But don't try to get inside me." Wally learned. Johnny was quite decent, didn't demand anything extra, didn't have bad or suspicious habits. But the feeling that he was living in the same apartment with an almost stranger, a completely unknown person, did not leave Walter. He should have been thrashed like Sidorov's goat. Uncle Peter, as always, expressed himself simply and categorically. But now, what's the point? And only the faithful Sam, waiting for Wally at home, exuberantly happy at his owner's arrival, reminded him of his past happy life. On one of his binge days, Wally finally kicked the office workers, who had been bothering him with various questions for a long time, out of the workshop and immersed himself with pleasure in a complex engine repair. The work completely absorbed him, and he didn't immediately notice the female voice coming from the small manager's office. I called, "You scheduled me for repair, and now you won't accept my car? This is outrageous! I won't leave on principle, do you hear?" "Hello?" Walter, wiping his hands as he went, approached the workshop manager, Igor, who was listening to the woman with a suffering expression. The lady, apparently, was very irritated and accompanied her words with energetic gestures. "May I know what happened?" He looked at the woman and smiled kindly. However, it wasn't difficult to smile at her sincerely. The lady, despite her nervous mood, turned out to be a pretty young woman about 25 years old with huge gray eyes, a turned-up nose, and long, light, fluffy bangs that she constantly blew out of her face with a funny, loud exhale. "Hello!" She turned sharply to Walter. "Another specialist. Am I supposed to tell everyone my story here? Maybe instead of talking, one of you will finally deal with my car?" "My dear girl," Walter said softly, and was internally very surprised by the thoughtless but completely sincere word he had uttered. After Olga's death, he had never felt anything remotely resembling emotion towards any woman. "I am not your dear girl," the lady resolutely interrupted him. "All right, not dear. Girl." Wally didn't let himself be thrown off balance. "Let's calm down and figure out the situation. What happened after all?" "Tell the story again?" she gasped indignantly. "Igor!" Walter looked questioningly at the manager standing next to him, who had been staring intently at the problem all this time. "Walter Stephen, it's simple." Igor resolutely stepped forward. "The woman." He glanced at the piece of paper he held in his hand. "Irene Petrovna did indeed make an appointment with us, but during the phone conversation, unfortunately, she incorrectly stated the make of her car. And now everything has become clear. I tried to explain to the lady that we cannot repair her car because we don't have the equipment to repair cars of this make. She needs to go to a dealership service center. But Irene Petrovna doesn't want to listen to me. Well, there you have it." Igor spread his hands, his whole appearance conveying what he thought of certain ladies who didn't understand a damn thing and didn't want to listen to intelligent people. "I see." Walter, having listened to Igor, shifted his gaze to the woman and smiled slightly. "Irene Petrovna, I wasn't mistaken? I'm afraid we really can't help you. But I'll write down an address for you now. I'll call there. And I think... Listen, I don't care what you think. Your sign says car service, right? She pointed expressively at her car. Automobile, right? So, what? She looked at Wally ironically. So, you will repair it. Irene Petrovna, please understand. It's in your best interest. Wally paused for a few seconds, searching for arguments. If, God forbid, your tooth suddenly hurts, you'll go to a dentist, not an ophthalmologist, right? And if by mistake you accidentally go to an ophthalmologist, you won't demand that he deal with your tooth anyway? Igor snorted, trying to suppress a laugh. What nonsense, the woman muttered, feigning inflexibility, although it was already clear that she was clearly tired of arguing. But she decided to have the last word. Fine, I promise I won't let this go. I will complain to your superiors, and not to some manager or some other boss. I will complain to your owner, the proprietor. I don't know. In short, the one who is in charge here. Really, this is simply unbelievable. A client comes, and they refuse her. What kind of business is this? She looked indignantly at the service workers who were suppressing laughter, and who, having started listening to the conversation, were now eagerly waiting to see how it would end. Well, that's your right. In that case, to not put things off, allow me to introduce myself, Walter began. What do I care about you? She stamped her foot in indignation. A rather high heel twisted, the girl swayed and would have fallen if Walter hadn't caught her by the arm. A light, barely perceptible scent of tart perfume wafted towards him, and her silky hair brushed his cheek for a second. And suddenly he felt excitement and surprise. He was alive again, immersed in these forgotten sensations, a little scared by them. He didn't immediately understand what she was saying. Irene pulled her hand, which he was still holding, away from him and said, In short, be prepared. You and you. She quickly pointed a finger at Igor and Walter. I will see to it that you are fired. Is that clear? She looked back indignantly at the now openly laughing service mechanics. The next day, he was working in his office at the firm's central headquarters and was hardly surprised when the door burst open and Irene entered rapidly, with a stubborn expression on her face. Hello? I assume you are the owner of the car workshop on Veshniakovskaya Street? She sat down resolutely in the chair opposite him. Well, I must tell you that with employees like the ones there, you'll soon go bankrupt. I bring my car, and they refuse to accept it. The model, you see, isn't right. They've become completely insolent, especially one of them there, not young. Instead of doing his job, he decided to get acquainted with me. As if I care what his name is. And he said... She smiled, then stopped in confusion mid-sentence, finally looking at Walter. After a few seconds, she brushed her 2 long bangs out of her face with a familiar gesture and smiled shyly. Oh, it's you! The woman exclaimed in surprise. Yes, it's me. My name is Walter Stephen, and you are Irene Petrovna, I remember. He got up from the table and bowed gallantly. You're a joker! It turns out you're the owner of this establishment. But then why were you in the workshop looking like that? It's strange. Well, why strange? It's quite normal. It would be strange if I worked in the workshop in a suit. All right, Rena, let's leave my strange behavior aside. Let's rather decide what we should do about you. Meaning? She asked in surprise. Well, how? You probably understand. I cannot fulfill your demand to fire everyone, including myself, Walter said seriously. Irene looked at him and unexpectedly burst out laughing. The laughter was so sincere and contagious that Walter involuntarily laughed with her, easily and cheerfully, as he hadn't laughed in 2 years. Well, yes, I guess my complaint is hopeless, Irene said, still sobbing with laughter. Well, all right, Walter Stephen. It was nice to meet you, despite everything. She got up from the chair and extended her hand to him. He took the thin, narrow hand in his own, and involuntarily covered it with his second hand, and held it. Irene Petrovna. Rena, forgive my impudence, but perhaps you would agree to have dinner with me, as compensation for us not repairing your car. After all, I must respond to your complaint, right? He said, surprised by his own words. Wally suddenly, for the first time since Olga's death, wanted to talk to a woman, to touch her hand again, to feel the light, subtle scent of perfume with some unusual tart smell. For Walter, this was a completely new sensation. All his life, only two women existed for him, Mom and Olga. All other representatives of the weaker sex, even the most beautiful and intelligent, were just people to him. He was hopelessly lost to romantic adventures. Female charms, which had been tried on him repeatedly, simply had no effect on him. He loved Olga, wanted to be only with her, and the thought of experiencing any new sensations related to women simply did not cross his mind. Well, if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's Wally's faithfulness. Olga used to laugh. Your husband, by the way, is a catch. Where is he now? Do you even know? At work, you say? Oh, look, you'll sit there in your sweatpants, and they'll steal your man. Well, if they steal him, then that's fate. Olga would answer philosophically, but she was being cunning. For some reason, she was completely confident in her Wally, and every day in his eyes she saw that her confidence was justified. So, do you accept the offer? He looked into Irene's face and smiled. You know I do, Irene suddenly replied. 20-year-old Irene was charming. At the same time, she didn't try to make any special impression on Walter, to charm or seduce him. She, apparently, didn't care if her hair was perfectly styled or if she had eaten all her lipstick along with her steak. By the way, Irene had an excellent appetite, and for the first time in 2 years, Walter ate with genuine pleasure in her company. Despite the age difference of more than 20 years, they found an amazing number of common topics for conversation. For example, Irene learned about the Labrador Sam and was in indescribable delight, turning out to be an old dog person. Despite the somewhat scandalous beginning of their acquaintance, Irene turned out to be a light, cheerful, kind person. I don't even know what came over me, she laughed, remembering the scene she had caused at the workshop. Really, I've never acted like that before. It was as if I went off the rails. Please forgive me, Walter Stephen. But first of all, not Walter Stephen, but Wally. We agreed, Rena. Walter gently chided her. And secondly, because of your spectacular appearance, I'm glad everything turned out this way. And I'm glad, very, Irene suddenly replied. A year later, Walter, looking younger, with shining eyes and squared shoulders, sat in his office holding a small velvet box. Inside lay a luxurious ring. A ring for Irene. I love her. I love Rena, he thought. Maybe as much as I loved Olga once, or almost as much. I don't know. What's the point of comparing? I just want her to be by my side as my wife. Always. Or at least for as long as it works out. He became agitated, jumped up, and paced around the office. Okay, what if she says yes? What if she just shrugs off my age, everything, and says yes? Rena, she's like that. She can. What should I do? Walter was afraid to voice the most important, essentially the only problem. Johnny. John and his possible reaction to all this. To Irene. To his father, who suddenly decided to continue living, and not just live out his days. Son, I need to talk to you. Each word came to Walter with great difficulty. He couldn't sit still, jumped up, and paced the room. He went to the window, deliberately, slowly, and neatly adjusted the fold of the curtain. Then he walked back to the armchair he had just been sitting in, sat down, but after a couple of seconds was on his feet again. John hadn't uttered a word all this time, watching his father. The silence was clearly dragging on. "Dad," John finally said, "maybe you'll tell me what you wanted?" "What I wanted to say?" Walter asked senselessly, nervously straightening the perfectly ironed collar of his shirt on his chest. His hand was noticeably trembling. "John, well, it's hard for me to tell you this, but I want to be honest with you. I really hope you'll support and understand me. In short, I met a woman." Wally finally said what seemed to him the hardest words of his life. "She's good, smart, decent, beautiful. In short, I really like her, and it seems, strange as it may be, she likes me too. I'd like to introduce you to her," Wally mumbled, not daring to look his son in the eye. "And Mom?" came from above him. "What about Mom?" "John!" He finally looked John in the eyes. "Mom is gone. She's been gone for a long time. I loved your mother very much, son, very much. And I still love her and miss her terribly. You know that perfectly well." "You miss her? Really? Well, imagine that." John snorted ironically. "But I see that doesn't stop you from having affairs." "Don't you dare talk to me in that tone." Walter found the strength to look sternly at his son. "And choose your words, please." "Listen, father." John called him father for the first time in his life, not dad, and this unfamiliar, somehow alien, as if forged word unpleasantly cut into Walter's ear. "Maybe this is some kind of joke? You're playing a trick on me, aren't you? Come on, admit it." "No, John, I'm not playing a trick on you. This is not a joke. I really want to introduce you to Irene. I would like—" "I don't want to meet any Marina," the guy shouted. "Not Marina, but Irene," Walter corrected his son. "It doesn't matter. Marina, Irene, Karina, or even a Mandarin. I don't care. I couldn't care less, you understand? Don't you dare bring her here. Got it?" John yelled. "All right then." Walter got up from the armchair and paced the room. He barely restrained himself from slapping his son. "I dare remind you that this is my apartment, and I will decide what I do, both now and later. Do you hear me?" He looked at John. "And if you don't like something, well, let's decide. Will we live together or not?" Walter's voice didn't tremble and didn't betray the turmoil that was raging in his soul and head. It seemed he managed to look resolute and firm, because John stopped shouting and watched his father silently and attentively. And then he suddenly blurted out, "Are you really going to kick me out of the house because of some—" "Be careful, John," Walter sharply interrupted his son. "Be careful. Think before you say something that can't be excused or fixed later." "Dad, what? You're already over 50, and your heart's acting up." John apparently changed tactics and brought forward the heaviest, most merciless arguments. "What kind of courting can there be at your age? It's time for you to retire. Think about your pension. And you suddenly decided to start courting women in your old age." John almost screamed, having completely crossed all boundaries. Walter listened to his son's hysterical shouts. Of course, John, overwhelmed by resentment and jealousy towards a strange woman, was clearly overdoing it, with the maximalism with which 16-year-olds judge older generations. The guy was talking utter nonsense. And yet, Walter clearly understood the wall of rejection and misunderstanding he was about to face. "Lord, what am I doing?" Walter suddenly thought clearly, continuing to listen to John's screams. "What am I doing? After all, she's half my age, and Johnny's reaction is typical. Everyone will think that, if not say it. Absolutely everyone." Yes, of course I'll marry you, Wally," Irene exclaimed with delight. disregarding modesty. I really want to be your wife. Thank you, Rena. I'm so happy. Only forgive me. We need to talk. He struggled to choose and voice the words, although he had already rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his mind. Rena, you see, I'm, to put it mildly, not a boy, he mumbled. I understand perfectly, perfectly. I'm not a girl either, Irene snorted. Rena, darling, but you know what I'm talking about, don't you? He sighed agonizingly. Yes, I know, of course. Her voice became hard. You are significantly older, and I am unforgivably young. And besides, I'm marrying you solely for your money, to take everything you have and run off abroad with a young lover. Oh, and one more thing. You have a bad heart. I can take advantage of that, finish you off, and voila. I'm the heir to everything. They'll tell you that many times too. Irene, he exclaimed. No, let's talk. Let's say all this nasty stuff out loud. I know all this perfectly well, Wally. And I also know that you are ruining everything right now. You are ruining, perhaps, the happiest moment of my life. Wally, my dear, darling, let's do this. Irene wiped away her tears, raised her face, and looked him intently in the eyes. Either you believe me completely, in my sincerity, in my feelings for you, or right now we say goodbye to each other. He looked into her eyes and believed, once and for all. At least at that moment, he thought it was forever. Irene moved into their large apartment, and by that time, Johnny, a second-year student, was living in a dormitory. The relationship between John and Irene, despite all of Walter's hopes, was, to put it mildly, separate. Walter and Irene and John. Even more incomprehensible and unpredictable. Something was clearly happening between him and Irene, and Walter tried many times to find out exactly what. John, what's going on? Listen, Father, I'm a man. You yourself recently rubbed my nose in that. Well, yes, I helped. His son snorted ironically. Well, actually, you created this problem yourself. You're talking about Irene, I'm talking about my life. That's it. Leave me alone. His son cut him off. John! Don't you dare talk to me like that! His father tried to call his son to order and immediately gave up. John, what if I buy you an apartment? Not getting anywhere with John, he tried another approach. Rena, we need to talk. What's happening between you and John? My dear, I won't say everything is perfect, but basically nothing too terrible. A usual story about a stepmother and stepson. Well, you know, stepmothers are never good anyway, but I'm trying very hard. And anyway, she hesitated. Walter felt that something very important was hidden behind John's aggression and Irene's playfulness. And this something didn't let Walter live in peace. It bothered him like a sore tooth. And so he sat on a bench in the park, stroked Sam's golden ears, and thought about what to do. How to understand what was happening in his home. And if he suddenly heard something close to the truth from one of them, he simply wouldn't have the courage to believe it. He had to see and understand everything himself, on his own. And he would have to do it without his son's and wife's knowledge, as disgusting as it was for him to secretly watch them. Oleg, hello? Walter dialed his deputy's number. Give me the phone number of the company that installed the video surveillance system for us, please. The next day, a quick young man taught Walter the intricacies of surveillance. The camera is tiny. You can install it anywhere. Better higher up, so they don't accidentally bump into it. He lowered his voice mysteriously. There's no sound, but the image will be of the highest quality at any distance. The company guarantees it. Having installed the camera in the apartment's living room, Walter went to work, sank tiredly into the armchair in his office, and turned on his laptop. There was no sound, but the image was clear, just as the technician had promised. John was the first to come home. He wandered around the apartment, then returned to the living room and settled directly opposite the camera, turning on the huge wall-sized TV. The guy sat on the sofa in a relaxed, comfortable pose. Alone in the apartment, he had no need to play the role of the offended or deprived. His face, so similar to Olga's face, so dear and precious, caused the Walter watching the monitor a pang of poignant, sharp love for his son. He agonizingly wanted to drop everything, run home, grab this long-legged, tousled, snub-nosed creature, his Johnny, and hold him tight. To ask for forgiveness for everything done and not done, to say how much he loved his son. Lost in his feelings, Walter didn't immediately realize that something was happening in the apartment. John's posture changed. He still remained on the sofa, only he tensed up, as if bristling. The usual sullen, angry grimace appeared on his face. On the sofa, instead of the sweet, nice Johnny, a copy of Ollie, sat a wary, angular guy, radiating anxiety and aggression. Irene entered the room. Judging by the movement of their lips, they were talking. Irene smiled slightly, apparently asking John something. He, leaning back further on the sofa and putting his feet up on the glass table, put a crooked smirk on his face and obviously replied, squinting and barely parting his lips. Irene turned and left the room. Walter couldn't hear what they were saying, but one thing was obvious. John was not at all like a miserable outcast with a cruel stepmother sufferer. And Irene had clearly not turned into a fury in her husband's absence. Rather, it seemed that John was behaving in his usual rude manner, while Irene was trying to smooth things over with patience and calmness. Walter, without knowing why, continued to watch his son sitting in the living room. John suddenly looked in the direction Irene had gone, got up, and with careful movements, clearly trying not to make noise, moved towards his father's office. Having disappeared from the frame, he reappeared on the monitor a couple of minutes later. One hand was shoved into his jeans pocket, and it looked very much like he had just put something in there. A familiar dull ache started in his chest on the left side. Walter gasped. At that moment, he suddenly felt like an ancient old man who didn't even have the strength to move his legs. So, John had betrayed him after all. John, not Irene. John was tormenting Irene and it seemed was quietly taking money from the safe in the office. Well, at least that was easy enough to verify. That same evening, upon returning home, Walter discovered that a rather significant sum had considerably dwindled over the past few weeks since he had last looked in his safe. He didn't talk to his son, but just waited, not knowing for what. And he waited. A few days later, he saw John carry a small rectangular box out of the office, which contained Olga's few but expensive jewels, which Wally had given her. Olga loved to wear jewelry, calling it our diamond fund. "I need to talk to you," Walter said the next evening. "Well," John snapped back as usual. "Money has been disappearing from our house, and not just money." To John's credit, he tried his best to appear calm and indifferent, but he wasn't very good at it. "Why are you so sure I took the money?" John smiled awkwardly, or rather bared his teeth, hiding his fear behind it all. "There's another person in our apartment, a complete stranger, by the way. Maybe we should ask her? What if our young wife doesn't have enough?" "All right then." Walter hissed the words through his teeth, feeling the familiar dull pain in his chest. "The money, of course, if it's still intact, you can keep. Give back the jewelry and get out." John left the room. A few minutes later, he returned. "Here's all your money." He threw the wallet at his father's feet. "I didn't take a single ruble. You can count it. But I won't give you the jewelry. I'll keep it. You can call and file a police report. I don't care. I won't give them back even if they put me in prison. These are Mom's jewels. I won't allow..." allow some strange woman to wear them. Do you hear?" By the end of the sentence, John's voice, trembling more and more, finally broke, and the guy, unable to bear it, sobbed. Walter stared at his son with wide eyes. It was as if the shell of bitterness, cynicism, and lies had been licked off John's face. Before him stood his beloved, only son, his and Olga's, their golden boy, confused and lost in his fantasies and delusions, but still his dear Johnny, still hopelessly grieving for his mom, and having driven this grief so deep inside himself that it had turned into hatred. Hatred for his father, for Irene, for the whole world around him where there was no mom. "John, forgive me," Walter said quietly. John looked up at his father with a tear-streaked face and said softly, in a barely audible whisper, "And you forgive me, Dad. Forgive me for this. And for Irene. I love you, Dad." Walter took a few steps and squeezed his son's outstretched hand with all his might. And around them, jumping and barking happily, his golden fur shining, Sam, who didn't know what he was so happy about, was bouncing around.